Michael Quin is the head of cell culture manufacturing at FujiFilm Biotechnologies, a business that helps make life-saving drugs on a daily basis. Having started his career in 2002, where there were just 80 people on site, he's since seen it grow to over 1,200 staff with a brand new facility currently getting built. I wanted to dig around his journey and reasons for him staying in the business for so long. In this episode, we talk about the importance that purpose has in the workplace and how to hire and build a culture where people stay and develop in their career. We also dig around why it's important that management is something we must constantly look to self-developing and the importance of feedback. I hope you enjoy the episode. Excellent. So, a warm welcome to Michael Quin. And firstly, thank you, Michael, because a bit of confusion on the date. So you are fresh into this with no preparation whatsoever. So I appreciate you coming on at such short notice. So can't wait to dig into the journey. But I always ask the same question first, which is, what does it mean to you to be a leader, would you say?
I would answer the question in two parts. I think as a role, as a job, leadership's about change. So it could be, as a company, we're here, we need to go there. It could be making a new product. It could be increasing productivity, overcoming some sort of challenge, and how you get the people through that journey to deliver whatever the challenge was. Personally, I like to see the development of people as well through that. How do you get people tooled up and ready to deliver those challenges, either company challenges or personal challenges, stepping up into a new role or into a different role? That would be my answer.
I like that, and I've never heard it described that, and it makes perfect sense because, like you say, there's companies who are always trying to get from A to B, where that's a particular type of project to change, or a person get made to be. So the fact that you're a massive influence in that makes perfect sense. And it's a great answer for no prep. Well done. That's amazing. So I also like digging around the journey right from the off, particularly with yourself, Michael, because obviously you have been at Fujifilm for how long now? Obviously since you started, haven't
you? Started in 2nd of January 2002. So 21 years now, I think.
Brilliant. And I'm always fascinated by people who have stayed with the business for so long, because I think the job for life sort of isn't as frequent as it used to be anymore. And I think people move on quickly than they used to be. So I think testament to the business, and obviously testament to what they've done to keep you there, which I'm really keen to dig around. So let's go prior to that. So what led up, early days, it was with manufacturing, was, STEM, was that type of stuff always something, the science side, something you've always been interested in, or how did that come about?
So I did genetics at Newcastle University. Yeah. At the time, I wanted to get into working in the lab. I had hopes to get into cancer research and hopefully contribute to a cure for cancer. So completed my degree at Newcastle, and I was living in the area, working at a pub to pay the rent. And then I got offered an opportunity to come to what was a VCA at the time on a temporary contract. It was a manufacturing role. Obviously, everything job adverts say must have so much experience. So I thought, well, it's an opportunity to go and build some experience and possibly transfer into lab work. So I came down, I worked here for 6 months on a temporary contract in the labs, or in the manufacturing facility at the time, making products. And then I got offered a permanent role in manufacturing. And again, I thought, well, it's a foot in the door. I'll wait and see what comes up in the future. And then I've been in manufacturing ever since. I guess it was a square peg in a square hole situation. I never considered manufacturing before, but when I was here, I really enjoyed the environment. Obviously, producing the drugs that go on to help people, life-saving medicines, new medicines that aren't available on the market yet. And then you sort of said, why have I been here for 21 years? There's never been 2 days the same. It's always different challenges, different problems to overcome. I like the thinking on your feet. How do we get this batch through? It's quite different from normal manufacture in that we're doing batch manufacture of high value drugs. So it's really all your eggs are in one basket situation, and getting that product through is really important. And then the scope for development here has been incredible. When I started all those years ago, I was the youngest person on site at 21, going on 22. There was 80 people on site. Now there's over 1,200 and growing. Loads of young faces coming in every month. It's incredible to see. I mean, you've been to the site, you've seen the growth. We're basically in the middle of a construction site.
Yeah, and probably one of the most, well, probably the most impressive manufacturing offices modern I've ever seen. Unbelievable. And we'll go into a bit further down the line, but that people sort of underestimate the importance of that in terms of the environment and coming to work and loving where you work and what's around you. So I think what they've built there is unbelievable. And exactly that, you know, from 80 to 1,200, and obviously big plans to, you know, for some growth coming up as well. Amazing that you probably don't reflect that often, do you, in terms of actually think about that in terms of what it is now versus what it was.
Every January, me and there's another gentleman here, Simon. We started on the same day doing the same job.
Yeah.
And every January we normally catch up and like, wow, it's 21 years. Imagine where we've come from.
Yeah.
But day to day, it's so quick moving. You don't get much chance to think about it.
I'm really interested in the purpose, because I think if people start careers for different reasons, and I guess the bulk of people start careers because they either are interested in something or they want to earn money and they see the longevity on it. You mentioned obviously one of your motivations was finding a cure for cancer, which is unbelievable, and you know it's something that thankfully money is getting pumped into to try and do so, because obviously it ruins so many lives. Why was that important enough for you to start a career? Because if people are passionate about something, there's a big difference in being passionate and actually going, I want to be someone who actually has an influence in this. What led to that?
Well, obviously it's a awful disease that affects loads of people. It was my interest was in genetics, and cancer is a genetic disease, and the science behind cancer is amazing because it takes several failures of your body defenses to cause cancer. So understanding how it came about and how you could stop it was interesting based on what I'd learned at school and at university. And then growing up, my dad died when I was quite young, like in my 20s, of cancer. So that brought a personal element to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And moving on in terms of 21 years, you talk about that purpose. Has that purpose ever shifted? Because sometimes you talk about day to day, management's hard, and there's so many ups and downs. And has that changed, that motivation for you from day one, or is it still very much there?
No, I think the motivation's the same. Obviously, I've got kids now that's different. That brings a slightly different angle.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of people depending on us, but day to day, the motivation's still the same. Yeah. Making medicines that are life-changing for people, new medicines that haven't existed before.
Have you seen it? Because I have personally, working recruitment, I guess we speak to people every day in terms of why they want to leave and why they want to start a business. And we see more purpose being more at the forefront, probably potentially of the last couple of years, maybe because of COVID or whatever. Now you're seeing people actually, and I think just the generation probably, it's probably not COVID, probably the generation is changing. People want more, and people want to be part of something that's for the better. Have you seen that shift and that be more of a focus of why people want to work for people like Fuji? Would you say because of that shift on purpose?
It's definitely common. We always ask during interviews, why do you want to come and work at Fujifilm? What's the motivation? And most people will say similar things to what I said. It's about helping people. They want to make a difference in the world. They want to improve people's quality of life.
Yeah, excellent. No, it is, and I think, and thankfully, I think that is going to massively benefit the likes of yourself, because I think the more people get into the job for the right reasons, they're the ones who are going to make the biggest impact when times get hard. Because I imagine it's a very frustrating role at times because it's not black and white, it's not linear, is it? Something. It's I mean, how complex can that be day to day because of that?
It's very complex. So what Fujifilm Diasynth Biotechnologies does is we produce active pharmaceutical ingredient on behalf of other companies, and it's a biologically produced. So we use cells to produce protein, and then we purify the protein. That's the drug substance. You may have seen on the news recently, there was a little girl in the area was treated with the most expensive product on the NHS. It was something like £3 million a dose. That's kind of the same thing as we're producing. So it's bespoke protein. You can't chemically synthesize protein because it's so big and complex. The effort that would be involved and the waste would be significant, but by using cells, the cells always produce the protein correctly first time, and then we purify it out. The processes we run range from a week to maybe 6 weeks, depending on the types of cells we're using. So as I said before, it's really all eggs in one basket kind of process. We need to get all the way through that process, making sure all the controls that ensure the medicines are safe and effectively produced are in place. So the team undergo significant training in GMP, which is good manufacturing practice, which is all the rules and regulations that support the industry about how we manufacture drugs. Everything has to be detailed recorded. So they get trained in how to complete the documentation. It takes about a year to go from a new start through to a trained person, really. So there's all that training investment up front. And then on the shop floor, every action's critical. So the team needs to make sure they're appropriately trained, that they're doing all the actions in accordance with the procedure, so we can verify everything was done as we said we'd do it. And even then, with all that training, we can still have problems. And then, so we have to react, put like fixes in place, but make sure it's still safe and we consider patient safety in the end, and then get that product through. So I've had nights where there's a call at 3 o'clock in the morning or something to say, oh, there's some problem. And then there'll either be a group call overnight trying to figure out how we're going to do it, or come into work, try and figure out how we fix it, keep those batches running along.
Yeah, excellent. And I imagine every business and every, particularly manufacturing, there's a pressure. There's always a time pressure. You look at a Nissan supplier, if something breaks, then they have to fix it. And I guess that's the same. I guess it's interesting if that thought process is almost different at 3 o'clock in the morning, because the purpose, you go back to purpose, obviously, is actually, these are drugs that save lives. And I guess that is, you must, you hire the right people who have the same attitude to all want to work together. So I imagine culture has been integral for you as a business to make sure that's important. Again, is that something they actively try to do? So is culture very important? Would you say there?
Yeah, so we have four core values here at Fujifilm, which are trust, delighting the customer, which is doing what you said you would do, and then two Japanese words, gemba, which is get out and see what's going on and understand, and genki, which means enthusiasm. And then that's the corporate culture we try to promote. So get involved, get invested, interact, learn. If we make commitments, we try to keep the commitments, all to deliver these customers or these products on behalf of the customers.
Apologies for interrupting this podcast for a very quick 30-second pitch of my business. Theo James are a specialist manufacturing and engineering recruitment search firm based in Seaham in the Northeast. If you're looking for any staff or a new opportunity yourself, from a semi-skilled level right the way up to C-suite executive, then please get in touch. We have a specialist consultant in each discipline ready to help. I'm extremely proud of what we've built over the years, and I'd love to extend that service out to you. Thank you. Enjoy the podcast. Yeah, interesting that. And have you seen the culture change over time with that 21 years, would you say? It's different when there's 80 people, isn't there, versus 1,200. It's much harder, I would say, the latter.
Definitely. Our HR team invests a lot in supporting the culture. So there's a number of, I can't think what the word is.
Incentives, I guess.
Incentives or programs that we've initiated to support that culture. So there's a behavioral competencies framework that we use that describes behaviors that are expected of managers and staff, and people are expected to feed back to each other where either the values were supported or not displayed. We're working on producing career development programs for people, so there'll be a fairly transparent pathway of like operators coming in, starting out, how would they progress through the company? Because I think, with the exception of maybe HR and finance that are quite specialist roles, once you come into Fujifilm, you can almost progress to any other area that you wanted. But those career paths aren't necessarily always visible to people initially.
Yeah.
So it'll help with conversations to say, well, look, you may be here now, you may want to get there. This is how we help you develop.
I think that's really interesting, because I think that's where businesses miss a trick sometimes, because they fill a role and they get the right person in, but they probably forget that exactly that there needs to be ideally a transparent career path to keep them motivated, because that is another reason why people don't stay for sort of 5-10 plus years now anymore, in my opinion. That's really interesting with Fuji, because I think what you do is very specialist, and I guess someone like yourself who's obviously progressed over that period of time. How's that normally done then? It's talk me through. So someone would come in. I imagine a lot of it is post-university, sort of grad stage, or how does that tend to work as it stands now?
We could recruit anybody, really. We're looking for attitude and capability, not necessarily education.
Right.
So we've had like graduates, we've had people that have worked in other industries. The steelworks is local, or chemical production. If they show they can work through problems, and that they're committed to working, anybody could come in and start. From there, it's, like I said, it's about a year of training. Everybody goes through everybody that starts, new intakes come in the first Monday of the month, and they go through a collective 2-week induction program, which teaches the basis of GMP and about the company. After 2 weeks, they've done their basic training, they go out to their teams, and then they'll start learning their roles. So in manufacturing, it's likely to be a combination of training and on the floor experience, learning off experienced members of the team.
Yeah.
After about a year, give or take, people are normally capable of operating the systems independently without the supervision. So there's a role change at that point, which obviously brings some financial benefits and stuff. And then after that, it's a continuous development, but the options open up. People can continue developing on plant, and we start to look for leadership in people and who could be shift supervisors and shift managers, or people can move to more technical roles where they're preparing documentation and setting up the projects for the manufacturing teams, or they could transfer out to a different department such as PD or QC or QA if that was where they felt more comfortable. Or people can transfer into manufacturing, obviously. And after that, it's just the more experience and the more diverse experience people gather, the more options are open to them, I would say. Where FujiFilm's located, we're the only company in the area really doing what we're doing. So it's difficult for us to recruit trained people with experience. I think the nearest places are maybe in the Lake District or Liverpool, Manchester. So sometimes it's hard to attract people to the area. So a lot of our development is internal progression.
I think a lot of companies can learn from that, because if you look at the Northeast now, there's and potentially UK-wide, but if we just look at the Northeast in isolation, massive skill shortages, which are going to get worse. You look at all the great stuff coming into the Northeast, and there's loads coming into Teesside alone. It's amazing, but obviously there's a lot of jobs, high skill jobs to be filled, and it's impossible because obviously you can't attract enough people in the area. So I think companies need to have confidence in being able to hire, not just on skill set, but like you say, hire an attitude. But it is difficult, and it's a bit of a leap for companies, I guess, and I understand that completely. But I think they'll get confidence from the likes of companies like FujiFilm that you've done that successfully, and obviously your retention rate, is excellent, which is massive, because a lot of companies really struggle with that. This is a tough question, but what is the best way to actually judge? Because we do it. We don't hire on skills, we hire on culture, but it's difficult sometimes to judge that in an interview. How do you see that when you're interviewing someone? You talk about obviously the traits you mentioned. How do you judge that on an interview when you've not seen them day to day? It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, we use a practical group exercise a lot of the time. So we have a few now. Obviously, during COVID, it was a bit harder because we had to keep social distance. And so for a period, we stopped doing the group exercises, and then we introduced a couple that could be done with 2-meter distancing. Our favorite is it's called the planks. And there's a series of pieces of wood of different lengths, and they've got notches cut out of them, and they all fit together to make a shape. So we'll have 6 or so candidates together. We'll present the exercise to them. They get an hour to figure out how the process, or how the bits of wood fit together to make the shape. And then the objective is they have to be able to build the shape in a minute. The planks start off smallest or biggest one on the bottom, smallest one on the top. And then when they come to do the final exercise, we'll start the clock, say go. They get a minute to get the planks from the pile into this shape. And obviously the time element brings the pressure.
Yeah.
So you do start to see some frustrations and like maybe some interpersonal skills being shown. You see the problem solving. There's a couple of traps in the setup where if a couple of pieces are the wrong way around, it doesn't go together. but you have to sort of think logically of like, well, it's a four-dimensional, three-dimensional shape. Could it be rotated or moved or whatever? In the time we've been running that game in the interviews, which is 15 years or so, I think I've seen it completed twice, which is amazing. But it really helps when people are working in the clean rooms. When I started, it was described to me as the closest you can get to working in space without leaving the planet, because you're in this highly protected environment. It's difficult to get people in because of the training and the like control of the facility. So if there's a problem in the plant, we need the people in the plant to be able to work through it, because getting other people in to help is difficult. Maybe if it was like a external supplier supporting. So having people that can think through the problems methodically and keep their cool and stuff is what we're looking for in the interviews, and that exercise really helps to show it. And maybe if it was just the questions, typical interview questions, maybe we wouldn't see some of those traits, but through the exercise and the pressure that the time brings, you do start to see, well, these people would be good fits. These people maybe not quite right for this environment.
Yeah, I love that. And you can see, having walked on your site and seeing it, you can see how that works perfectly, because that's the job, isn't it? It's like you say, we go back to not being black and white, linear. It's working together. It's coming against challenges you didn't expect to go up against, and like you say, pressures on the time wise. I think that's brilliant. Can you remember who made that game? Who was it?
There's a couple of teams. So the team that stands out, is there was a guy called Simon. He came to work for us for a while. He worked in our small scale microbial facility for a little bit. Then he came to work for me with the cell culture team, and now he lives in Texas, and he runs one of the manufacturing streams over in Texas for us.
Yeah, some legacy. Yeah, amazing. I love that. I think that's brilliant. And that is the type of stuff that companies, for me, it's outside the box, isn't it? It's outside the box, but you see, and we're no different. We run assessment days when we can now when we're hiring, and you get to see people in non-structured formal environments and what they're really like. So I think that's brilliant. Management, obviously, you're a manager now. You manage a team. You go back to why you first wanted to get into the business. That it was for a different reason. Was that just an organic process for you that just happened, or was that something, again, you wanted to get into?
I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I started. Obviously, it was the route of progression. I think I was lucky. I was at FujiFilm when I was, because it was a couple of years after I started, the company started to grow, obviously, to expand to the 1,200 or so we are now. So I was lucky to be in a position where I'd already developed some experience and could take on training others, teaching others, be responsible for an area. I don't think I was a particularly good manager when I started. I made loads of mistakes. For example, one young lady that worked for us at the time told my manager, I don't think Mike likes us. He's not talked to us much since I started. And that was because I was focused on projects and my work. And I didn't necessarily understand what was required as a manager. Now, many years later, those things are much more important to me. I understand it's not about me anymore. It's about them, and how do we bring them in, get them trained, get them comfortable, get them invested in what we're doing, and get them producing the products and enjoying being part of the FujiFilm community.
That's harder, isn't it, when you're managing? Because exactly that, you've almost had to be, your job is to be selfish, your job is to be successful in however you do it, and then suddenly you've got to have this selfless nature, which which you can't. No one teaches you. It's difficult, and I think some people are just born management where that's the motivation. Almost been working for themselves is difficult, and other people they have to learn it. I was definitely the latter. I would say, it was a challenge for me too. Is that because you think your motivations changed over time? Would you say now to be able to do that?
I had to learn basically. Obviously, to continue progressing and developing, what you did before doesn't necessarily work now. So I had some feedback about my management style, capability, however you want to call it, which I had to address. So I invested quite a bit of time in researching management techniques, looked at loads of different books and things about approaches, and I sort of tried different things. I'd read something, I'd think, okay, that sounds good, I'll try that. I'd wait and see what the outcome was. Did it have a positive influence or did it not work for me? And then try and keep all the ones that worked and replace all the ones that didn't work. And just because they work for me doesn't necessarily mean they'll work for somebody else. But obviously with my team, I've tried to now teach people as they come through the ones that work for me, the mistakes I've made, or the things that didn't work, and then let them adapt or change to suit how they work.
I think that's a key point you've hit on there, because I think people think two things. One, I think once you've made management, you're a manager, that's it now. Do you know what I mean? And you almost, some people forget to work on themselves. Actually, is to double down because now you've got more responsibility to do so. And also the feedback is key. How many managers listen to this thinking I get feedback on how I manage? Probably not that many. People get feedback on as a manager's on their own work, or potentially they'll get feedback on their staff. But how many actually get feedback from their managers in terms of, look, let's talk about your style. Let's talk about, because I imagine that it's difficult. It's being criticised is difficult, isn't it? But I guess that was obviously a turning point for you, a catalyst to do something about that. By the sounds of it,
definitely. It wasn't nice to hear you're not doing a good job, but then you sort of have to just accept. Well, that's how people are perceiving me. How am I going to address it? And then I've enjoyed that journey. So I live about 20 miles from site, and I started listening to podcasts and audio books in the car as a way of like time saving with the learning. And now a drive to work where I don't listen to a podcast or a audio book seems like a waste of time.
I completely agree. I just think it is, particularly when you're a manager, you've got more responsibility. So I completely agree with that. I'm exactly the same. I feel like I've wasted time if I've not taken the opportunity to learn. Can you, any in particular, any books or podcasts that they've helped you?
Well, yours obviously.
Thanks, mate. Yeah.
I like a diverse selection of books. I would recommend Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willing, Navy SEALs leadership principles. I recommend that to my team a lot. There's a book called Love is Free, Guac is Extra by, I can't remember the guy's name. It's the guy that invented Chipotle, the burrito place. That's a really interesting book about how they develop people, because they have similar principles about, they bring people in often from underprivileged areas. They work through the restaurants, and the people that like show a flair and commitment in the restaurants go on to be managers of restaurants. They don't necessarily bring people in external to do those roles. So I really like that one. And then some other books. I think Simon Sinek's books are quite good. Start with Why, probably the favourite.
Yeah, which is perfect for business. No, yeah, good recommendations actually, and yeah, the bulk of those, some of those I've not heard of, so I'll be looking at those. Amazing stuff. Um, just want to touch on manufacturing, obviously, and I guess how that's changed over time, but particularly probably the last 2 years and challenges. What for you has been the most challenging aspect, would you say, of manufacturing, supply chain, everything that, as a whole, would you say, over the last sort of 18, 24 months?
Um, so a lot of our equipment is what we call single use. So there's a plastic element inside the bag. The advantages are it reduces the risk of cross-contamination, speeds up turnover. The disadvantage is obviously we're outsourcing some of the facility to a third party. And through COVID, when companies were developing more on COVID vaccines and other drug products to help the situation, the demand for those products went up because it's a quick way to put capacity down in other areas. So a lot of the time, we've sometimes struggled to source the components, but we got through it. But we maybe had to adapt how we were doing some things to fit the components that were available.
Yeah.
The lead times on components were quite high, but now things seem to be coming back to normal. The supplier companies have put more capacity in to produce more, and the general demand seems to be dropping a little bit. But through the pandemic, we continue to operate and grow at the same time. Myself and my manufacturing colleagues tended to be on site every day still. Obviously, we observed social distancing rules and things, and we had a lot of procedures in place to support that. And then the non-essential staff, as we'll call them, that didn't have to come to site, they tended to work from home more so that the people at site were more protected.
Yeah.
But it's become part of the way of working now, that working from home is acceptable where previously maybe it wasn't as acceptable.
Yeah, I think that's just companies that have adapted, haven't they, to the environment. So yeah, and manufacturing as a whole, and obviously STEM as a whole, do you think there are any particular challenges that it faces? You know, the bigger challenges going into the next sort of couple of years, would you say, in particular?
I'm not sure, because there's continued investment, like you talked about, in the area. I guess the risk is always outsourcing.
Yeah.
But the growth we're seeing here would suggest the company as a whole is or not the company, sorry, the country is investing in keeping manufacturing in the UK.
Yeah.
So personally, I don't see any big issues.
Yeah, good, excellent stuff. I'm going to ask you a couple of well, full transparency here. I'm going to ask you a question that the last guest asked, but full transparency, I completely forgot to ask him. So I'm going to ask you a question, which I think Bill Scott is the Bill Scott OBE is the chief exec and co-founder of the Wilton Group on Teesside. So brilliant business. And what Bill has done for the Teesside community is huge, particularly on the apprenticeship side. So I think he would have asked you a question regarding apprenticeship. So I don't know which is the best way to word it, but how important do you think apprenticeships are for a business from the area? And do you think there's any which ways that as an industry that we can improve the apprenticeship sort of sector, would you say?
So I think apprenticeships are very important. When I talked about the intake to manufacturing earlier, apprenticeships is one of those routes.
Okay.
So again, there's two young ladies I can think about or three young ladies started as apprentices a few years ago. They came through manufacturing, built the experience as I described. One is now a area manager for one of the manufacturing facilities. One transferred to a commercial role, but has since left the company. A third left the company to relocate due to family priorities. We're now looking at how do we build our apprenticeship schemes, again, with those career paths in mind. So we're working with the local schools and colleges in the area to look at how do you develop those programs. I know the HROD team are working with Hartlepool University to support the apprentice schemes and to help. We can help them see the types of skills and knowledge we need so they can teach the theory in the classroom, so that when they come to us, they've already got that basic background understanding and can like support the work environment.
So it's for you to enable to do that then, so they come through with the right skill set then, is it crucial that you work very, very closely then with the colleges and schools to be able to give them the knowledge to teach them that? Is that typically how it will work?
Yeah, so our HROD team are more involved than I would be personally. But we have a team actively working on apprentice schemes and how we interact with the colleges, how we bring people in, what the schemes we can offer are. We didn't really talk about the new facility that's being built, but that's going to create like potentially 200, 300 jobs. And we're looking at what percentage of that could be filled with the apprentices, but that'll be a couple of years out. So we need to be working with the colleges now to develop those people so that when the facility is ready, the apprentices are ready to fill some of those roles.
Excellent. And really exciting plans there, huge exciting plans for business. And like I say, the office that we walked around was the best manufacturing office I've ever walked around in 15, 20 years. And that's, I think, so I appreciate it's not always possible. It's so important to have an environment where people want to come to work in, and that you can tell that has been designed specifically with people's happiness in mind and productivity in mind, and the cafes, the pods, it felt relaxed. And I guess you talk about pressure involved in that bit. It's so pressurized in terms of the purpose and what you're doing. I can see that so much thought's gone behind trying to take that pressure away from people, enjoy the coming to work. I mean, how you'll have seen it from the early days. How different does it feel having those offices now, would you say?
It's very different. The site we're on is ex-ICI. So when you walk around what we call the legacy site, the old part of the site, you can see some of the remaining infrastructure from that time. And initially we were sort of landlocked in where we were. And we were on that legacy site. FujiFilm was able to buy some derelict land adjacent to the site where we built this office complex, and the aim of the expansion is to build a campus feel. So we've progressed like 2 stages now away from the legacy site where we're building the new facilities. The expectation is as the new facilities come up, the old facilities will become redundant and replaced and turned around. So gradually the old ICI influence will be removed and it'll be replaced by a tech campus in the northeast. So it is very different. And again, the HR team are actively supporting this culture. So last year, for example, we had a street festival on the grounds. So where the new building is, there used to be a road that ran public highway between the sites, which is now grassland and paved areas. The company brought in food trucks. There was like 3 different food trucks each day for 3 days. And we had some local events where we were sharing developments in each area and some of the new things like the new manufacturing building. And so everyone was invited to come down. have some food. There were some games like inflatable axe throwing and giant chess and things. And so it only ran over the lunchtime, but it was like had a bit of a party feel. People came in. I think it rained a couple of days, but it was really nice to see everybody come together and enjoy that that event that had been put on to recognise some of the successes we'd had.
Yeah, I love that, and again, companies overlook the importance of that coming together. Away from work, getting out your PPE and actually just spending some time together. So I think that's brilliant, and you can see what they're building there. Culturally and actually building there is something that is a sight to behold, because it's the best facilities for me I've seen in the Northeast. And I think when you're looking to grow a business like that, you need people you're going to need people to move from where they are. And I think that's a massive selling point for people to be proud of where they work and the environment. And I think that's is massively overlooked, hugely overlooked. So I think fair play to you and the team that have done that. And so just we'll touch on briefly to finish it. So plans then for the next, I guess they're obvious, is to build and fill this site. So exciting times, I imagine, for the next sort of couple of years.
Definitely. We've got 2 construction programs ongoing now. One is to build a new PD area that will hold PD and QC, and then a new manufacturing facility that will essentially double the capability and capacity of the site, which is being built in conjunction with our sister sites in Texas. So again, state-of-the-art, new controls, all designed to protect that product and the patient, but also give us the capability to make more medicines for the future.
Yeah, amazing, brilliant. I think what the business does is fantastic and really impressive. So look, thank you so much for this. It's been great. It's been a real good insight into the business, and I think what people will and hopefully should take away is the importance of purpose and how you harness that, importance of culture and in terms of how you work well with the team, and also where we go into an environment where it's going to be very hard, it's probably even harder to hire, is to do that, to look outside the box and how can you do things differently, and how can you hire which isn't just on a black and white qualification. So look, thanks so much tonight. It's been superb. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.